Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar, Navigating Digital Investigations in 2020 using Blacklight and MacQuisition. My name is Arvinder Singh Archer. I'm the Director of Channel at Blackbag for Asia Pacific and Latin America. So before we kick things off, there are a few notes we'd like to review. We're recording this webinar and we'll share on-demand version after the webinar is complete. If you have any questions, please submit them in the questions window and we will answer them throughout or in our Q&A at the end of the webinar. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Tim Thorne. He's our Senior Solutions Engineer at Blackbag. Tim completed 30 years of service with the Metropolitan Police in London, where prior to roles in digital forensics, he worked from New Scotland Yard in drugs, murder, and robbery investigations. He specialized in long-term covert internal corruption investigations and later became the anti-corruption command lab manager for network and digital forensic investigations. He went on to lead the New Scotland Yard counter-terrorism unit, where he managed a team responsible for exploiting digital media associated with those engaged in acts of terrorism, both in and outside of the UK. So thanks for joining us today, everyone, and welcome, Tim. Tim, if you're ready, I'll hand the reins over to you to get started.
Thanks, Arvinder. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all staying safe in these current awful times that we have. So we have just an hour or so, a quick overview of what's new for 2020 from Blacklight and MacQuisition to assist you with your digital investigations. And just to kick things off, I'd like to start off with just a quick potted history of Blackbag. As many of you may know, the company was founded in around about 2003 by some ex-Apple digital forensic security staff, and the guy who's on the screen there, Derek Donnelly, was one of the founders, and he's currently our Chief Scientific Officer, so specializing in research and development in and around new technologies, coming from Apple and Windows, of course. He was the head of Apple's digital forensics department for 5 years, around the time of when Steve Jobs, of course, was the boss. So he has some great and interesting stories for what happened back then. We have our headquarters is in San Jose in California. And the vast majority of our staff are based across North America, and we currently only have about 58 staff directly employed by Blackbag, but of course that's changed as a result of our recent acquisition. More on that in a moment. We have a small international team based out of the UK and France, and we have this team is responsible for everything that goes on pretty much outside of North America. Many of you will also be aware that we actually support Windows and Androids and have done so since 2014. Many of us have always imagined that Blackbag were just the Mac guys. This is no longer the case. And the reason this came to pass was because we were approached by an investment funding on behalf of the US government, and they said, look, we like what you do with Mac forensics. Why can't you do the same for Windows and Android? So that's what we did prior to 2014. And since then, we've been fully supporting Windows, Android, iOS, and Mac directly within our forensic tools. We pushed on with our development in these areas, and we have Windows memory forensic support added directly into Blacklight, which I have to say is super easy to use and makes memory analysis actually something that's pretty easy to do. And it's the sort of thing I appreciate as a practitioner, because I know we can't, in the forensics world, all be expert in every subject within the forensic world. So it's quite nice for us to have a tool that every examiner can actually operate in respect of Windows memory and easily find and discover, for instance, malicious processes or evidence of malware running on a computer using Blacklight's built-in memory forensics function. Of course, we like to lead the way with Apple forensics because we are still the leaders in this field. And in January 2018, we were the first to announce that we had full support for APFS in our MacQuisition and Blacklight products. This is quite important because we will say that we support APFS fully. Some of the other forensic companies may support APFS, but some of them are, how would you say, honest enough to say that their support is actually limited, whereas we're happy to say that we will provide you with full support around APFS, which of course is now the prevalent file system across all of Apple's devices, including the iPhone. We also continue to lead the way in respect of imaging Mac computers, and we still have the first and only tool with MacQuisition that can give you a physical decrypted image from a T2 chip Mac, and the same from Apple Fusion drives. This is so important in forensics. Most of you will appreciate the value of getting that physical image, be it in mobile devices as and when you can. But now with the T2 chip Mac, this is equally as important because every single computer coming out of the Mac factory right now has a T2 chip on board. And all of the competition in this area will give you a logical read. And of course, MacQuisition can give you a logical read of a T2 chip Mac, but it goes that extra step and will give you that full physical decrypted image. And we will even attempt to decrypt unallocated space on the T2 chip Mac. Of course, you'll get varying results depending on how aggressive trim and other mechanisms for tidying up unallocated space are. But with the physical decrypted image, there's potential for you to get tens of thousands of more files than you will get with a logical read. And this is one of the main reasons for this, is because the file system, when it gives you a logical read from your forensic tool, that logical read does not give you everything. It'll give you what the file system wants to give you. The file system itself will sit on top of some data that is not deleted data, but is logical data that the file system owns, but is not willing to give you. And that's why it's important to get that physical decrypted image whenever you can. Some of the other new things that came 2019 and into the early part of 2020 include the ability to deal with Apple iCloud productions directly inside Blacklight now. So when you get your iCloud production from Apple, which I urge you all to try and do, I know this isn't being taken up particularly vigorously by everyone, but Apple are actually very good at giving you data and giving you information. But you need to ask for it. And one of the first things you should do early in your investigation is approach Apple and make sure they preserve the data that they may hold on your suspect, because they will do this. And then provided you get back to them within the requisite time period with the correct paperwork, they will then give you this data, and they are actually very, very helpful in this respect. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that a large amount of that data is not easily readable due to encryption and compression and the way in which it's delivered to you. But now we have a mechanism that means you can do that directly inside Blacklight. So you don't have to actually send the data outside of your organization any longer, which was the service we provided up till the beginning of this year. Some of the other new things that have come to light since 2019 R1 release include things like image categorization. Some really clever AI built it directly into Blacklight that gives you the ability to categorize your images. We have some technology that we've added as plugin modules, and our first one is the Apple Pattern of Life Lazy Outputter. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So perhaps the biggest news for us as employees, and hopefully this will turn out to be really good news for you as our customers, is that we're now a Cellbrite company. Cellbrite acquired BlackBag at the beginning of this year. and we're now well into the integration. And I have to say, I think this is only going to be good news for our customers, because we've gone from being a relatively small company, 58, 60 employees at any one time at Blackbag, and now we've joined a much larger company of 700 plus, and we have access to some amazing resources around R&D, mobile device forensics, and all sorts of other benefits, which I'm sure are going to filter down to the customer with time. It's kind of exciting, really. So let's get on with this. Let's start to look at the tools themselves, and I'm only going to talk about MacQuisition and Blacklight today. So MacQuisition is now a 4-in-1 triage solution for your Mac investigations. This is because we've added some extra functionality, and the slide there, it says we support over 185 different types of Macintosh models in their native environment. I think that number is actually higher than that now, over 200. Some of the new functionality that's come this year with 2020 R1 MacQuisition is the ability to preview and collect pictures and documents when you're running in a live mode. This is excellent, and this is assisting those situations where you need to access a live running Mac. Now, maybe that's because of time, maybe that's because of the worries around encryption and whether or not you have access to passwords, etc. But this is what MacQuisition can do for you now. You can actually go and preview all of the documents, pictures, and videos, and before you select them for your collection. It can, of course, be a huge time saver. You can also do keyword searching on a live running system. This is a real bonus. You can actually go and search out specific keywords either in the file name or within the document or within the binary document file, and you can go and then select the files that are relevant to your investigation. This could help you if perhaps your warrant limits you in that way. And also you can browse the entire file system live using MacQuisition. Once you've made your selection, either by doing this previewing mode, you can actually export that to an LO1 file. And this new feature is very useful because it helps protect your metadata. We can wrap up the collected files into a nice logical evidence container, which you can then later bring into Blacklight for full analysis, and it would have protected some of your metadata, which of course is very important. We have a webinar that's out there at the moment called Take It or Leave It. It's available on our website, and this goes into some detail around some of that functionality. And once again, just a reminder, remember, MacQuisition is still the only tool that will give you this physical decrypted image of a T2 chip Mac. We have built-in Paragon drivers with a MacQuisition now. So this gives you the ability to write to NTFS drives, for instance, because as I'm sure you know, natively your Mac will not write to an NTFS volume. You can read it with a Mac, but you certainly cannot write to it unless you have some extra drivers. We now give you those built directly into Blacklight. And some of you may have seen that because of the current virus situation, we were able to give our MacQuisition users a mechanism to collect data remotely using MacQuisition by supplying you with a software version of MacQuisition. So this is great. This gives you a way of dealing with those Macs that you physically can't get to right now because of the restrictions around travel, etc. And it also gives you a whole new approach to the way in which we can deal with targeted collections from Macs at the moment. And I urge you, if you are a user of MacQuisition, to take a look at our website, and you can see there's a blog that explains to you how you can get your hands on the software version of MacQuisition to assist with your remote acquisitions right now. So we're going to take a look at a MacQuisition live in a moment, but before we do that, just another quick overview, this time of Blacklight, just to discuss some of the key functions and some of the new things for 2020. MacQuisition, Blacklight, of course, remains the only commercially viable tool that can run on Mac or Windows forensic workstations. And in my opinion, it remains one of the easiest tools to use from a forensic training perspective. We think we can take people with very little forensic experience and give them 2 days of input, and we can do this online with our virtualized training at the moment, and we can teach them to be productive with Blacklight within those 2 days. So what this means is they can take a piece of evidence and actually go to a position where they can produce reports that are meaningful and useful to support digital investigations just with those 2 days of investigations. So here's a few of the more recent improvements and developments that apply across both platforms. We're going to look in some detail in a moment about ingestion, how to deal with your evidence ingestions. I always spend a little bit longer on this than perhaps I should do, but for me, it's almost the, well, it is the second most important phase of your digital investigation, because getting the best forensic image is the first and most important thing for me in forensics. And then the second is actually applying the best processing options to that piece of evidence. And this can mean a number of things. It doesn't mean applying everything. It means applying what's right for the situation that you're investigating. So that's what I like about the way Blacklight deals with this, because it gives you some really flexible ingestion options. We have some new ways of bringing in our Celebrite ingestion, evidence items. And we have a direct integration with Passware at the moment, which is seamless, which means you won't even notice that you're running Passware in the background to mount your BitLocker or other encryption containers directly inside Blacklight. Once you're at the analysis stage, we've redesigned the way in which our filters work. Blacklight's always been exceptionally good at filtering large data sets. But now we've gone a step further, and we've allowing users to create complex file filters and file filter groups. And this is very useful for managing large data sets, which Blacklight is good at, because you can bring in a huge number of evidence items into Blacklight and then use this complex file filtering system to narrow down to the data that's relevant to your investigation. We've made some improvements to our automatic parsing of items such as account information, downloads, and cross-platform activity, system activity, file system activity. And we're going to look at that shortly when we go live with the demonstration. We've also added extra support for log file parsing and the ability to deal with logical evidence files or folders directly within Blacklight. Smart indexing came in towards last year, and this has been extended further now to deal with and capture things from metadata, file metadata, which will be indexed now as part of the Elasticsearch, which is a super fast way of dealing with the way in which we index files. Let's look at Windows now specifically, some of the new support in Windows. We have the ability to look at device histories from multiple volumes and multiple volume shadow copies. And we do this in a way in which it's very easy to reveal the file history on different items. So when you find a file in Windows, it's there's a very intuitive way of then comparing what you found with various system backups, volume shadow copies. Simply by right-clicking on the file, you can go and explore the various historical versions of that file. We've extra support for some of the artifacts under our Actionable Intelligence button in the device, in the in the Actionable Intelligence button, and we're actually automatically parsing out all of the account info across both platforms, web history, downloads, and Windows 10 timeline activity and such like directly into Blacklight. And of course, we continue to develop our Mac support. I've mentioned already that we have full support for iCloud productions. We now also fully support the 1015 time capsule backups directly into Blacklight, and we know how awkward they can be. But now Blacklight is making that very easy for you. We have now built directly into Blacklight the ability to handle and search across unified logs. This is a huge resource of information within the Mac world right now. A lot of the logging has been moved over to this unified logs over the last 18 months. And it's a huge amount of data. And in fact, you'll notice when we look at that shortly, you'll see that you're not even allowed within Blacklight to review that type of data without applying a filter from the start, because there's simply too much data to display it all in one go. We also have support with Apollo, Apple Pattern of Life Lazy Outputter support. This is some amazing scripts that have been written by Sarah Edwards, former SANS instructor, I think she's still a SANS instructor, but she's employed full-time with us now at Blackbag. And this does some amazing stuff on some of those databases, SQL databases in particular, in iOS or even on Android or even in Linux. You can run this script, these series of scripts, well over 200 of them now, against these databases, and the granularity and the detail in this data that's being pulled out by these scripts is staggering. And just recently we added more a very neat way of dealing with keychain within Blacklight, and I'll show you how we handle that in a moment. And it's giving us access directly within Blacklight to try and crack keychain data and reveal more information that is available in your Mac analysis. And also, we've done a lot of work on AirDrop to give you a lot more information within the GUI in an easy way to understand AirDrop transfers and to identify files that have been received or sent using AirDrop. And we attempt to identify who the sender was and who the recipient was. Okay, so what this all sort of looks like, this has been a lot of development in the last 2 years. And it sort of has helped develop this, what we call a forensic ecosystem, where in my chart on the screen now, you should see that we have some built-in functionality in the dark blue inner circle there, this is functionality that's built directly into Blacklight. And it includes the things like Apollo that we've mentioned, smart indexing, memory analysis, image analyzer, passware, all things I've touched on already. And then just as importantly, around the outside in the lighter bluey colored area are all of the other tools that we support or we receive we can ingest evidence items from, or we can export to. So for instance, up in the top right hand corner there, we have Burla, which of course they do great work with vehicle telematics extractions, where you can bring those directly into Blacklight now. So you can compare someone's Burla extraction, their vehicle extraction, along with their iOS and their Android and their memory and their Mac OS extractions as well. You can see all of that information in the same interface. Of course, we have even closer working relationship with Celebrite now, and we support their ingestions, and this is something that's going to get even better as we move forward, without a doubt. We export and we prepare reports and export functionality to communicate directly with some of the legal review platforms. Our data can be sent directly out for Nuix ingestion or for tools such as relativity, making it easy for people perhaps in the corporate sector who use tools like these legal review platforms. You can make sure that Blacklight produces a product that can go directly out into these. There are plenty of other tools that we support, such as Grify, and a new one from the relatively new one from the UK called Semantics 21. These are all great tools. We don't try and restrict you to any one of these, and we like you to have the ability to use Blacklight to talk to all of these other tools. So please feel free. For some of you, you may have noticed on the webinar there is a Q&A box. So if you have a question as we go through, please fire it into there. Unfortunately, we haven't really, due to the number of people here, we haven't really got time to open up the audio for questions. But if you type a question in there and I can get to it, I certainly will do. And Arvinder will be monitoring that box for us as well as we go through. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to jump quickly over to a live demonstration. And what I wanted to do was show you guys MacQuisition. And hopefully, I've just pulled it up onto your screen there. Just double check that we've got it. Yes, there we go. So MacQuisition, for those of you who currently use MacQuisition, there's no obvious GUI interface change right now. But as you look at it in a little bit more detail, you can see that there are a couple of changes to the buttons, and I'm just going to cover those off in a short while. At the moment, we have across the top of the screen where my mouse is moving backwards and forwards. This is the area that we refer to in both Blacklight and MacQuisition as the command bar, because it has these buttons that control what's being displayed to you below. So it drives the whole of the interface. So at the moment, over here in the top left, I have the case details button selected. So this is where the user of MacQuisition can enter the information relevant to their case. And of course, we encourage you to be as descriptive as possible here, because it's easy to get in a mess later when you don't remember exactly what image number 50 or data collection number 60 was all about. This is your opportunity to fill in the data, and here's a free text box underneath where you can type in some additional comments. What you would have spotted is over here on the right hand side, this is new within MacQuisition, where it says current machine time. And it's displaying to you the machine time of the machine on which you are running MacQuisition at this moment in time. So this is me. I'm actually running this live on the machine that I'm doing the presentation to you guys on. And so it's showing you that I'm based in Central European summertime, and this is the correct date and time for me where I am right now. Now, the reason this is important is because recently we discovered that where a Mac goes flat, occasionally where it goes completely flat and the system time is lost because there is no battery power inside the Mac at all, this current machine time will reset to a Mac epoch. In other words, in the hex there will just be zeros. And Mac will record all of those zeros as the beginning of time for whatever epoch is in force. So if it happened to think that all zeros means it's 1971, then it will display a date and time of 1971 in here. Now, that never used to be a problem, but it is now, because our imaging will not like that, and it will not let you image a computer that is so far off the actual date and time. So what we have done with this version is we've built in this ability to hit this change button here, and that'll open up another little box which will allow you to set the system clock. So this means you can bring the date and time up to something more meaningful, and you can then go ahead with your imaging. I don't need to make the change because this is obviously a live running Mac and everything is good. So what's the next button over? If we come up to the command bar again and scroll over and look at the browser button, this simply gives you as a user pretty much what probably most of you would expect to see anyway, even if you weren't MacQuisition users, is the ability to browse the file system using the triangles here on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to look into my Macintosh HD, I can expand the volume by clicking on the triangle to the left, and I can start to drill down into the file system simply by clicking and expanding all of the triangles and browse the file system up and down like so. So this may be the way that you choose to get to your users' data. Maybe your warrant actually says all you're entitled to take in this particular case is the whole of the Tim directory. So it says Tim here. This is as I said, this is my work computer. So you can see that this is where I would go, I could just take the whole of this directory simply by right-clicking on it, and a box opens up saying add to selected items to the collection if I needed to go down that route. Of course, I'm probably more likely to be going down a little bit more granular than that, and so I would open up, and maybe all I'm going to be interested in this case is all of the, say, the downloads folder, for instance. So here's the downloads folder. If I expand the downloads folder again, or if I double click the downloads folder, I can now see the contents of Tim's downloads folder. And if you noticed at the top, just underneath the command bar, where my mouse is right now, you can see we have this trail of where we are, which is kind of neat because it gives us the ability to browse up and down the file system without having to click triangles to minimize and maximize. So if I wanted to go back to the users part of the path here, if I just click users, it'll take me back to users. Or if I need to go back to the Macintosh HD, I just click to the root of the Macintosh volume and it takes me there. And then I can use these backwards and forwards arrows just to the left here where my mouse is. And so I can just go backwards and forwards as though I'm using a web browser to go up and down the file system. Makes navigating super easy. But what you're more likely, or what I find particularly useful when we're running training classes and people want to know how to best use MacQuisition, they like this new search functionality. So the third button over is the search button. So if I select search, opens up a new window and gives us the ability to do some searching across the evidence item that we're exploring with MacQuisition. In fact, before I go on, there's one thing I just realized I wanted to mention to you because this is useful. If I go back in the browser view to the root of the drive, what I forgot to show you was it'll actually deal with attached volumes as well. So can you see I have an orange item here called Tim_student. Well, this is indicating to me that I have attached to my device, I have a external hard drive attached. This, of course, is available in exactly the same way. So I can browse this because it's an attached device, and I can select and add items from here to my collection as well. So that's worth knowing. When you start to see all sorts of extra devices down here, they are not always going to be internal devices. They can be externally attached devices as well, which could be useful for your investigation. So back to search. So within the search functionality, you've got the ability here to look at particular locations. So if I come over to the left-hand side, just underneath the case details button, where it says location, it's possible for me from here to actually determine the location that I want to do my searching in. So let's focus on Tim's downloads folder again. So if I just select the downloads folder right now, like that, and then if I decide actually what I want to do, I don't know the file name right now, but what I'm going to be interested in is a particular file type. So let's try this, see how this works. Maybe if I go looking for PDFs, I could put extension is PDF. So let's hit search. Wow, I need to tidy up my downloads box. There's plenty of PDFs in my downloads box right now. So we could then extend this, and we could start to use this search functionality as a bit of a filter. And if I decided, well, actually, maybe all I want to do is look for PDFs that are of a certain size. Perhaps if I went in here and I looked for a PDF that is greater than 1 megabyte. Let's see. So now I've narrowed down my search by some filtering, and I've managed to get it down from quite a big number to the few that I have here. I could narrow down that search even further by date. Perhaps I had some relevant dates that we knew the bad guy had downloaded something for the internet, and I can actually go and look at the dates and be selective and filter on the dates from here. So let's come back out of this now, and I want to show you a different way of searching. So I'm going to hit the reset button. If you see, there's a button here that will clear this and give me the ability to reset. So now that I've reset everything, let's look at doing some searching for a document within the downloads folder. So I've kept my downloads folder available, and now I'm going to search for, and I spotted it when we were there a second ago. If I search for BRI British, and if I search within documents and binary files and hit search, Blacklight is now searching across all of my documents and binary files, but only in my downloads folder for the word British. So it's taking a few seconds because it's had to look actually inside some of these zip files or these compressed files, binary files, for the word British. And sure enough, it's found a couple. And I noticed this one earlier. Here's a PDF. And over here on the right-hand side, I'm getting a review of the document, and underneath the actual preview of the document, I'm getting some limited metadata about the file. So what we would do is, if we wanted to add these to our collection, simply all we need to do is come over here, select the files that we want. I'm going to select all of these simply by holding the Shift key down and then clicking. So now all 4 of these files are available to me. And by right-clicking, once again, I can add these to my collection. So I'm going to go ahead and add them to the collection. And so you can go on and on like that and do your review, your preview, and keep looking through all of the files and folders that may be of interest to you. Perhaps once you've done that keyword search, you then also want to do a collection in the more established way that we used to do these with MacQuisition, using this button here, the 4th button over, the collection button. And this is very neat here, because this is where the guys at Black Bag Engineering have developed this over the years to give you all sorts of categories of information that you can go and grab simply by selecting them, and by putting blue checks, like you can see they're already selected here on some of these system data items, because we are actually in the system data area, where my mouse is hovering now, indicating that we're in the system data area. When we come down, the next area for data is called user files. Where the mouse is right now, you can see user files. And currently there's only 2 users on this. We have the root user and Tim, my user account. And at the moment, both are selected. Can you see these blue ticks over here to the right? Well, I'm not going to be interested in the root user for this collection, so I'm going to remove the tick from here. And you'll notice all of these numbers now are recalculating. The file sizes have all changed now because we've narrowed it down just simply to Tim's data, not the system's data. So on a per user basis, you can see MacQuisition has given you all of these categories to select from. And there's pretty much everything here that you would normally want to go for. Maybe you're just interested in email. So if I just highlight this email option here, come across to the size, and you can see actually there's quite a lot of email on here. I've got 20.9 gigabytes of email. And with that highlighted over here on the right hand side where the mouse is now, you can see a collection summary of all of that information, and you can see exactly where MacQuisition is going to go and grab all that information for you, and you can see the file paths to all of those files. So it gives you a lot of detail, so you can be sure you're getting the right information in your collection. Some of the other things worth pointing out here, we may just be interested in the user's keychain, and more on this later as well when we look at Blacklight. But down here on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side rather, I've selected the user's keychain, and I can see, look at the size of this keychain. There's 71 megabytes of keychain information available to me from this keychain here. That's a lot of information about passwords that may be available to us in Blacklight to exploit later. Lots of other different categories there. Maybe you're just interested in Chrome artifacts, and in this particular case, I've highlighted Internet-Chrome, and there's 2.6 gigabytes of Chrome information available to me in this case. A lot of data here. So when we scroll down further, some more categories of interest for you here. Maybe you're interested in the sleep image from this computer. So this is the image that's generated when the computer's about to go to sleep. This isn't the same as when you push the lid down on your laptop. This is an image file that's generated just before the battery goes dead on you. And you can see I've got 2 gigabytes of information in my sleep image file that could be relevant to my investigation. What else is worthy of mention? Of course, in the next 2 or 3 lines down, you can see there's iOS lockdown files. Well, this used to be so useful to us, didn't it, when we could use these in respect of iPhone analysis. And it used to be the case that you could take the lockdown files from a bad guy's computer, put them onto your own forensic machine, and then convince the attached iPhone that it was back home and it can see its home computer, and it would give up its data. Still possible with older phones if you come across them, but not a good tactic for your up-to-date hardware and iOS versions. And then coming right down to just to finish our story with MacQuisition, coming right down here, we can see at the very bottom of the screen, I have under additional files. Here we have those 4 files that we found by searching for the word British. They're listed in my additional files section. We're not finished here, because if you decide, oh, actually there's some more that I need to go for, I could go back to my search button in the command bar, or I can use this little button that's tucked away over here on the right-hand side where my mouse is circling now, and I can manually go back, and I can simply go back into a Finder type window, and I can browse using the Finder type window to go to wherever it is I want to go to identify additional files to add to my collection. So I'll open up another browser window, and I could simply drill down into, maybe this time I'm after some of Tim's pictures, and I can do that. But of course, in this particular function, you're not getting that preview that you do when you use the browser button up here in the command bar, because when I'm using the browser button in the command bar, I can do the preview that we've been speaking about. And so finally, the final button, because our time is limited today, the final button that I wanted to talk to you about for imaging was simply this button here for imaging Macs. This is where we do our proper forensic imaging of drives and devices from. And in this case, you can see, for instance, we have physical memory available to us because we logged in as the administrator user on this machine. If I was just a normal user or I didn't have admin rights, I wouldn't be seeing the physical memory here. Just a couple of things worth pointing out. Here is the attached with this orange USB logo here where my mouse is right now. This is the attached USB hard drive that I mentioned to you earlier. We can see that. But above that, mounted as disk 1 in this case, is what I expect to see now with a typical Catalina version of Mac OS. I would expect to see what we're calling an APFS container here. And this data is described as being synthesized. And the important thing to remember here is this is a virtually mounted disk containing these volumes, and these volumes here all share the same unallocated space. So each volume only contains live logical data, which means the unallocated space for this disk 1 actually resides around all of these volumes. It's important to remember that, and it's for this reason that you cannot image any one of these volumes on its own. You have to take them as a whole. You have to take the whole of disk 1 or the whole of the physical device, because on its own, the Macintosh HD data volume will not be readable in your forensic tool. It acts, it's often described by people as acting a bit like a RAID, in as much as you can't just take one of those RAID physical devices and read the data off it. If it's like a striped RAID, that type of thing, it needs the other devices to be able to put all of the pieces back together. The same is true here with MacQuisition. So I did mention one of those webinars earlier, but if you want to learn more about the complexities of imaging Macs, please take a look at that. There's a lot of information on our website to help you with that. Imaging a Mac is significantly different to imaging a Windows device, but MacQuisition does make it a lot easier and clearer for you than most tools. Over here on the right-hand side is where you select the image format. So in this particular case, it's only offering me two options, which is advanced file format 4 in a compressed or uncompressed flavor. This is because this is the only image format that will give you your physical decrypted image from a T2 chip Mac. And this is primarily due to the fact that it's the only image format at the moment that we've been able to use to give you the capability to take a non-linear image from a T2 chip Mac. Normal imaging starts at sector 0 and then just images sector by sector by sector through to the end of the device, or with some tools it'll start at the end of the device and go backwards. You can't do that with a T2 chip Mac. It's not possible. I didn't expect my FaceTime to go off, sorry about that. So that's MacQuisition. I spent far too long on it as normal, but it is important for me because if you want to get the best result from imaging a Mac, you really need to be using MacQuisition right now. It's the best tool that's out there for you. I'm just trying to have a quick look down at some of these questions. I'm sorry, guys, there are so many questions there. I'm not going to get time to actually weed through those, but we will answer every single one of them with an email, and perhaps Arvinder will have a few for us at the end as well. So let's concentrate on Blacklight now. I fired Blacklight up. It's on, should be on your screens now. Let me see. Yes, I can see it. This is what the interface looks like, and I'll give you a few moments to settle and have a look at what we're seeing here. There's a lot of information on the screen, but it is very, very nicely laid out in an easy to understand way. Once again, across the top, we have our command bar. The command bar dries everything that's going on below it, down here where my mouse is circling now. It dries everything we're seeing. So at the moment, I have the details button selected, the third in from the left. And because I have the details button selected, I am seeing the details of whatever volume I have in my drop-down menu selected. So if I wanted to look at the active Macintosh volume on this computer, I select it there, and I'm getting an overview now of this Macintosh HD data volume. On the left-hand side, in the sort of grey-blue area, this is called the component list. And I appreciate this looks a little confusing when you first have your first glance at it, but when you actually invest a little bit of time in looking at it and working through what you've got here, it's actually quite straightforward. If I shrink down some of these drop-down menus, and then we can have an overview of what we have here. The first item, called Gibson Computer, is an AFF4 image of a MacBook Pro, actually. You can see that. Then the second evidence item in our component list is this EO1 image of the boot camp volume of the same MacBook Pro. So what we've done in this case is we've actually imaged them separately, the different volumes, different partitions on this MacBook Pro. Then I have underneath there, I've brought in some media here from my case, and I'll explain to you why we did that in a moment, but I have the keychain files that I extracted out of the Gibson computer and generated my own logical volume of just the keychain files. Underneath there, I've also added, for the purposes of this demonstration, a Windows 10 memory dump, so we can have a look at that in a short while. And I've also added an iPhone. In fact, this iPhone was a backup that I extracted from the Gibson computer image, the first item in our list. So these are the evidential components of our case. I could have one computer in here, or I could have 50 computers in here. And this is where they will reside, underneath evidence in the component list. Directly underneath the component list is my activity list. So this is where I can see what activities I've done or enforced on my evidence items. The first one is demonstrates to me what exports I may have in the case. And the second one, it actually shows me the status of my evidence. So I can actually see what is going on with my evidence. So let's select that evidence status now. Just have a very quick look at this. So with evidence status highlighted, I've got this list of all of my volumes again, and there are a lot of them in this case. This is why it looks a little bit complicated. I'm going to scroll to the top So for every single volume on my case, I can see exactly what processes have been applied to it. So if I come down to the first meaningful volume, which is this one here, number 4, the Macintosh HD active volume, if I highlight that, I can see that this is the user's data volume for the Mac computer. And I can see that I've carried out all of these activities that have got green ticks associated with them. Where I see an orange sort of amber warning triangle is indicating to me that I've done some processing in this area, but not all of it. So for instance, under this Macintosh HD hashes item here, if I select the play button, I can see a little box opens up to show me, okay, there are still some more hashing activities that I haven't done. And this is because when I processed my case, I simply went for MD5 hashing, and I declined to take SHA-1 or SHA-256 hashing. If I wanted to do that right now, all I needed to do was to add a tick to there, and if I hit OK, Blacklight will go off and it will apply SHA-1 hashing to this particular volume. So this theory, under hash types, can be applied to all of these other items here. where there's an orange button, amber button, warning me that there's more items that I could do. So it looks a bit bewildering with all of the ticks, but once you focus in on it, you can see that actually this gives you a really good granular way to deal with all of your evidence items. What this means is you can focus on the things that are important to your investigation. What has been done to your case, what processes have been applied to your case, are actually selected at the evidence ingestion stage. So let's take a very quick look at that right now. The way in which you add a piece of evidence to Blacklight involves selecting the add. This is one mechanism. Up here in the component list at the very top, I can add a piece of evidence by selecting on the add button. Here is where it describes to me the different items that I can add. So I could add attached or mounted devices. If I had an iOS or an Android device attached, I would have the ability, a green button would apply next to this line to allow me to add and bring in the iOS or Android device. Or I can add files, folders, or disk images simply by selecting the add button here. That opens up a browser button, and then you can navigate to a piece of evidence. So in this case, I'm going to select a different EO1 file, expert witness file format, and I select add. So Blacklight has gone off and it's grabbing that EO1 segmented file right now, having a look at it, and it's assessing the contents of the EO1 file. And so what you can see now, this is the data ingestion window, or the add evidence window. Blacklight has determined for me what it thinks is best for me to process in this middle window, in the white window. So it's identified the volumes where it feels there may be some data of use to my investigation. So I, as a user, can decide whether or not I go with Blacklight's recommendations, or I can add my own. So perhaps in this case, you may notice within this gray area here in the center of the white middle window, there are a number of volumes. These, of course, are the volumes that make up the APFS container. And at the moment, I've chosen, or by default, Blacklight has chosen not to process the unallocated space of this volume. Or I should refer to it as a container. And if I put a tick there now, you can see I've manually been able to add a tick to this particular volume, the unallocated space. So I could process my unallocated space. So once you've made your selections here, maybe you want to select all of them, and I could do that by simply coming over here to the main item in the left-hand window and putting a tick at the root of the case so that that's applied a tick to every volume. If I wanted to process every single volume, and now I come over to the third and final part of the evidence ingestion window, this is where I can select the processes that I want to apply to the volumes that I have selected. So this is where we spend a lot of time when we're doing our formal training. We spend a good deal of time looking at these options, because this is where you can make or break your case in many ways. There is a temptation with some other forensic tools to always hit the find everything button. And for me, that's not always the most intuitive way to go about your investigation. And in fact, in some ways, it's not the best way, because if I hit the comprehensive button that's available to me here, you'll notice that I get a warning menu popping up saying, look, hang on, this is going to be pretty heavy on your resources and will take a long time. If I hit continue just for the moment, and I'm just going to go through, you can see that it's put a tick in virtually all of the categories here that it can. So this is going to do all of the processing that Blacklight is capable of doing to that particular evidence item. This may and is highly likely not to be a good thing in a case like this, because if we take a look at a particular example, for instance, if we go and look at this area here, snapshots and volume shadow copies, if I have a look by clicking the ellipsis next to the column, just come back out so you can see that clearly. Here's my snapshots and volume shadow copies option. What processing do I want to do to those? If I click the ellipsis next to that, I can see what Blacklight has found, and right there you can see on the Apple side, it's found 3 snapshots, and on the Windows side of this investigation, it's found 4 volume shadow copies. So this is going to be more or less like processing this computer twice for the active volumes, so the Apple volume and the Windows volume, the live ones, and then a further 7 times for the various backups. So this is like processing a computer 9 times if I select all of these from the start. So this is why we encourage people not to use the comprehensive button unless they really need to or they've got a good reason to. We encourage people to have a look at all of the options and consider what you want, what is specific to your case. And we recommend that you build your case, and because you may be able to exclude it from your investigation early when you find out maybe it's the son's or the daughter's computer of the bad guy, and save yourself a lot of energy later. Because when you hit that comprehensive button, for instance, you know, like in some of the other forensic tools like Ncase, where you have all of those great end scripts that you can run. Well, imagine selecting every single end script that had ever been written and running it against every single case. It's just not the way to investigate digital forensics. So that's why when you come to ingest your evidence, have a good think about this and have a look at the options that are available to you and build your case. Now, I'm only going to mention a couple more of these because if you haven't got Blacklight and you're about to get a trial of Blacklight, I want you to be aware of a couple of other things that may cause you some difficulties. Processing archives. Down here where my mouse is going backwards and forwards right now, this is an option I'd invite you to consider whether or not you really need this from the start. Because if you select it, Blacklight will go ahead and it will process the archives and it'll go 2 levels deep in archives. So if you have a zip within a zip, it'll process those 2 zips, but it won't go any deeper than this. And there's a good reason for that, because you probably heard of things called zip bombs, where you get zips inside zips inside zips, and they go on and on and on. Well, when we come across those, especially with system files, you'll find that these can go on and on and on. And as a word of warning, I noticed in a case that I processed, without processing the case archives, the case was about 30 gigabytes in size, the case file for my forensic case. When I processed the archives just 2 levels deep, it grew to 90 gigabytes. It was huge. So just be cautious. And the reason you don't need to worry about this right now is because you can simply process the archives later, or you can select them manually when you identify them as being potentially relevant to your investigation. So once we start our investigation, you find a zip file within the case, all you'll need to do is right-click on it and process that zip file. So no need to do it from the start unless you really need to, or perhaps, you know, maybe you're going off for the weekend and you're going to leave your machine running for a couple of days, then that's great. But if you want to get to results quickly, apply a little bit of thought to some of these things. And the last one that I'll mention now is calculating file entropy. Again, this one at the very bottom where my mouse is now, this is very resource intensive, and it's designed to help you identify possible encrypted files or containers. Now, the thing about file entropy is it'll take a long time, and the results aren't always definitive. And in my opinion, there are often better ways of finding encrypted files, not least just simply looking for encrypted applications or encrypted file extensions, or there are other ways of doing this, and you'll save yourself a lot of time not looking at the randomness of every single file, which is what this file entropy will do for you. And then finally, the last thing that I've got time to mention today here is this new feature here of managing passwords. when we were talking about attacking the user's keychain. If I select manage passwords now, you'll notice here that I have a password manager window has popped up, and this gives you the ability to enter any passwords that you have that you may think will attack the user's keychain. We'll already have the system keychain for you, but now with this new version of Blacklight, you have the ability to put in some passwords here that may assist you attack the user's keychain file. And this will give you the ability to go after those passwords that may be stored in the keychain. So this could be very useful. So this is where you put your passwords in. You can type them in, or you can import them using this import button right here. Now you need to process this at the beginning of your case, which is why it's applied here, and you can actually enter the passwords at this point. But what I tend, because I've finished with this window now, I'm just going to hit cancel. But what I tend to do, and I found seems to work really quite well, is I will extract the keychain files out. And if you look in the component list here I have, I've selected my keychain files from this system, and I put them here. You can see where they all are here. I'm opening this up in browser view. You can see keychains here. And so what this means is when I find additional passwords, I don't have to process the whole case again. What I can do is I can come and process just this volume. So I can come back and reprocess this volume, adding my new possible passwords to try and crack the keychains on this in this particular case. So that's quite a useful and very quick way of trying to get that useful extra information out. Okay, so that was how we add evidence items, and the do's and don'ts and the watch out fors of how to ingest evidence into Blacklight. The final three things down here on the left-hand side are content searches and index searches. So Blacklight empowers you to do content searches. So this is detailed searches of the entire file system, and also the contents of files or binary blobs of data, however you want to do that search. So this is the traditional keyword searching across the whole of the volume, or however you narrow your focus. And so, for instance, if I wanted to generate a new search here, if I just call this test, maybe I can narrow what I want to search on simply by selecting the volume that I want to carry out my keyword search in. So just for the purpose of this example, if I wanted to look just in the, let's go for the active bootcamp volume. So this is the live Windows volume. I can, in this box here, under ignore extensions, I could actually list the extensions I want to ignore. For instance, I probably wouldn't want to be doing keyword searching in JPEGs, so I would put JPG here as an extension I don't want to do the keyword searching in. Here is where I would enter my keyword search. And we're not going to have time to go into this, but if I was to just search wheel here, that's the keyword search I could apply to, and at the moment Blacklight will go and search the keyword wheel in every file on the bootcamp active volume, but not in JPEGs. So this would take quite a while anyway. I can narrow down the searches over here on the right hand side by perhaps skipping files of a certain size. So I might not want to search in files that are any bigger than 2 megabytes, because I'm only going to be interested in, say, small document files. I could also decide whether I want to search the content or just the file name. And you can see there are other ways of being more granular with your content search. We have a whole load of built-in searches that you can run within Blacklight, and you can use the filters as well. So if you had a filter that's active at the moment, you could just select files that match a filter. And we're going to look at file filtering in 2 seconds. I can actually also do regular expression keyword searching. And you can see we have some built-in regular expressions that will find, for instance, things like MAC addresses, IP addresses, email addresses. These are regular expressions, the open source regular expression format. When you're ready to go, you simply hit Start Search. So that's the traditional searching mechanism within Blacklight. It gives you a really good granular way of drilling into the data that you're searching for. But of course, we recently added index searching to Blacklight. This is what we call smart indexing. So we're only indexing what we believe to be relevant user data. So this is data that's generated by the user and its associated metadata. So you're not going to be wasting your time indexing things that you're never going to search for. And this works quite simply. You would come up to, well, let me just show you. I have one here that's ready to go. I'm calling this one where my mouse is hovering now. I'm giving the query a name, BMW wheels. And in this particular case, my query is this here that I've highlighted in the blue, where I put BMW and wheel. And when I hit run the query, Blacklight will be searching across the evidence items that you have selected. So this is a good example of how you need to be sure that you have everything selected that you want to bring into your case. So I've just added in the component list, if you see, I put the ticks into the boxes up here where my mouse is running up and down now, so that I brought those evidence items in, and the index, could you see, immediately returned all of these hits. Because it's an index search, it's very quick. And it's highlighted this particular file here for me, for instance. It's a spreadsheet which is found on badge number 18. So this is where those numbers and colored badges come into play. I can see that it's found this on number 18. If I look at number 18 here in my component list, I can see that this was on volume shadow copy number 6. This particular hit of this file was found on volume shadow copy number 6. And sure enough, within the file itself, if I hit preview in my file content viewer here, I can see it's a spreadsheet that Blacklight is previewing for us here. And I can see that it's a spreadsheet, and there's the word BMW wheel, for instance. Now, just so you're aware of this particular methodology or tactic, if you want to see this file that we've got highlighted here and badge 18 actually in the file system, all you need to do is right click on it and you get a series of options that come up. And if I wanted to go and see this on the actual file system, if I come down to reveal, I can ask Blacklight to reveal this file to me where it is in the file browser view. So if I select that, Blacklight immediately jumps over to where that file is on the file system. And here it's highlighted it for me. And if you come down to the very bottom of Blacklight, you can see in the status bar here at the very bottom, where hopefully you can see my mouse moving up and down, you can see that this actual version of this record.xls file was found in the users directory called Gibby iCloud, iCloud Drive, and there it is, record.xls. So that theme runs throughout Blacklight. If you right click on an item and you want to see where it resides in the file system, that's the way in which you can do that. Okay, one last thing. I know we're short of time today, but one last thing here. If you wanted to see the file history, because I wanted to mention this because I discussed it earlier with you guys. If you right click on the file, again, one of the other items that you'll see that you have here is called file history. If I select file history now, I get this really neat way of displaying to you. There are actually 7 versions of this file. And if you look here, you can see that you have 6 of them available in volume shadow copies and 1 of them available to you on the live device. So once again, that functionality is available right through the system within Blacklight, and it just makes it very easy to manage these often complicated things such as volume shadow copies and such like. Now, I've just had a message from Arvinder telling me that I'm talking too much as usual, so I apologize about that. Arvinder, are you feeling we've done enough?
I think we've done very well. We've had a lot of questions come in actually while you've been presenting. Shall we do a few?
Yeah, sure, as long as they're not too difficult.
So let's go with one of these. Can MacQuisition image a bootcamp volume found on the hard drive?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, we had a very quick look at that. If I just put MacQuisition, if we just go back up onto the screen here, when you go for your physical device, when you image the actual physical device within Blacklight, you'll be getting the whole of the physical device. So I haven't got Bootcamp live on my on this particular Mac, so I'm not seeing it here. But if I did have Bootcamp installed, you would be seeing it in this view right now, and you could image it directly from here. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll do one more. If I image a Mac computer with MacQuisition, is the forensic format compatible with other analysis tools?
Yes, it is. And once again, do you remember in MacQuisition, when we're choosing the type of image we want to generate, if we come up here onto the right-hand side where I'm choosing my file format, here you can see some of the formats that we can use: RAW, DMG, and then different flavors of compression for EO1 files. Well, RAW and EO1 will be common to any forensic tool. DMGs, I'm pretty sure every tool supports DMG now, pretty much, I think, forensically. And the other format, of course, that concerns people is the AFF4 format, which when we go onto this volume here, remember we looked at this and you could only see AFF4 as our image format. AFF4 is an open source file format, which is supported by several of the forensic tools. Now, I know a few of them were looking to bring it online more recently, but certainly X-Ways and obviously ourselves, and I believe some of the other tools also support AFF4 now as well.
Thank you. Let's just do one last one then. Can MacQuisition target specific user accounts?
Yes, it can, and we saw that in different modes, didn't we? If you could either do it in the collection mode, which is the one I have active on the screen right now. When I was choosing which user account I wanted to work on from this area of the screen where my mouse is hovering, this is where I could choose to select data from particular user accounts. And of course, the other way was in live mode, where I could choose just to navigate to particular user accounts. So yes, you can be very specific with MacQuisition to be sure that you're only collecting the data that perhaps you're entitled to, or the data that you want, rather than irrelevant user accounts.
Thank you very much, Tim. So we've had a lot of other questions come in as well during the presentation that we weren't able to get to, but we will reach out to you individually after the webinar to answer those questions. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and be sure to subscribe to our blog, which is at blackbagtech.com. If you're interested in learning more about MacQuisition and Blacklight and any of our other products and services, including those from Celebrite, please email us sales@blackbagtech.com and or reach out to Tim or I as well if you want to. Thank you all again and have a wonderful day. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.